Welcome, everyone, to Monday Afternoon Roundtable. Got a guest with us today, Brianna.
Hello,
Did I say it
Yep.
right?
Brianna.
And Brianna's been on here before, but not regularly.
No.
But Jason says our ratings go up a little bit when
Yeah,
she's
so-
on, so that's a good thing.
Yeah,
So,
we need some ratings bump in the ratings. So
Like and subscribe if
Yeah.
you want to see more of Brianna.
There
yeah,
you go.
we brought in the ringer.
the ringer. We got an interesting topic today,
Yeah,
talking
very
about
good.
court testimony and preparing for court, because
Mhm.
that's an important part of what we do, probably one of the most important.
Very much. Yeah.
And we brought Brianna on because we want to talk to her because she's never appeared in court testifying from a
Not yet.
investigator
Yep.
perspective. So, a little bit will fall into what she does and learning the new the business as
Yeah.
far as testifying in court. But there's a lot to it, and just
Absolutely.
preparations, like in everything else. The more you prepare, the better you're going to do.
Right.
hmm
And I see so many people go into court that are not prepared, either as a witness for the defense or for the plaintiff. It doesn't matter. But we testify, and we have testified, the three of us, Tim, Jason, and myself, from a law enforcement perspective, we testified quite a bit. So we kind of knew the court
Yeah.
lingo,
Respect.
what's going on, the rules of the court. And I think those are all important. And some people a lot of the attorneys don't brief their witnesses on what to expect when they
Yeah.
get to court. And there's always a lot of surprises. But, yeah. And so what I try to do before I go in is know everything I can about the case from my client's perspective, because that's who we're representing and that's who we want to do the best for. But from the other side, the what ifs, what questions are going to be generated from the other side, from the defendant's side, or vice versa. And then I can prepare myself a little bit.
Yeah.
A good attorney will bring everybody in and kind of sit down and not do a mock trial because that's expensive.
Yeah.
But they'll do a review. Here's what to expect. Here's what you need to wear. That's important too, Jason. A lot of
Absolutely.
Brianna, a lot of people come into court wearing their, whatever, their
Yeah.
holy jeans, or a T-shirt
Yeah.
that's got some kind of
Work shirt,
logo on
work
it.
hat.
Yeah, and I get work clothing if they're working, but you just gotta dress. And Jason, you always said this: dress like you're going to church
Like you're going to
for
church or,
court because it's
or
important.
a job interview
'Cause You're,
type
you're
thing.
trying to impress the judge or the jury, whoever it may be.
Right.
But there's more to it than just district courts, peer courts. You have depositions. You have different things that you may have to do as part of the process. Depositions are a whole different animal, but whatever you say in that deposition is your testimony. And they're going to use that when it goes to court, especially in civil cases. And I've testified in more depositions than I care to talk about. But whatever I say in that deposition is going to be carried over. But I always close my depositions with saying, if I learn something new in between now and the time it goes to trial, then I can change my opinion.
Right.
It's however we opine on whatever we opine on whatever it's from an expert witness testimony, whether it's a surveillance situation where you've gathered evidence. But the key to it is being truthful
Right.
and being able to document, take what you've documented and present it to the court, because that's going to be the deciding factor.
That's
And-
why reports and pictures and all of that is so important.
Yeah, and your report writing, that's going to be your,
Testimony.
yeah, and the better reports you have, the better your testimony is going to be, because you're not going to remember every single thing that happened, because the more cases you do, the more they run together.
3 years
Right.
out, right?
Yeah.
You'll be called in.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to know all the players involved, know their names. Don't refer to people as this subject or the
Right.
target or whatever, like you have on the report, most likely. But be able to refer to Mr. Johnson or
Right.
Mr. White did this or I observed this, and be able to be complete in your sentences, use good sentence and good grammar when you're presenting yourself. But it's where you win or lose in the courtroom, and that testimony is important.
Yep.
So you got to understand the system itself, who the players are, the judge, do your research there. Who you were talking about a case with a Superior Court judge.
Yeah.
Each judge is different, whether
Every
it's
single one.
they are, and you got to kind of know what they expect
Yeah.
and the little things that might make them upset or get them off center to what they're looking at. But you got to be able to understand who that judge is. And there's jury or a judge how do you word it, where you try to pick your judge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, the lawyers do that
And that's-
groundwork beforehand.
And they
right?
should, yeah.
Yeah.
But we try to help with that as far as picking the right judge for the right case, and sometimes that's difficult. But the most important thing is if you're testifying before either a judge or a jury, if it's a bench trial, you're presenting your evidence to the judge. If it's a jury trial, of course, you're presenting to the jury. And we all knew when we were in law enforcement, when you're talking to the jury, you're facing the jury, and it's usually to your left, and you're speaking directly to those jurors. And you usually have 12 jurors with an alternate, and you try to make eye contact with as many of them as you can while you're talking. You don't want to ramble. You don't want to sit there and and ah and try to make up stuff as you go.
More than what needs to be
Yes,
said.
Yeah,
correct. And
just
sometimes
answer.
that happens. I see
Yeah.
that more than not. They talk too much. And then the lawyer has to say, whoa, let's back
Right.
up. Yeah. But that, because you get nervous sometimes and you start talking, but
Try
it's,
to explain.
that's right.
Yeah.
right. There's nothing wrong with taking your notes to the stand. And I do that. I don't take my entire case file, but I'll take the notes that I use and I'll say, may I refer to my notes? Some lawyers will let you, and some say, well, can you not go by memory? And I say, well, I have a lot of cases. I'd rather refer to my notes. Judge always allows that.
Right.
So
How
it's
can you not though? Like I said,
right.
2 or 3 years, and you've got a case coming up, and you're having to testify, and it's been a 2-year-old case. Nobody can remember. What
In as
they
many
read.
cases we have, yeah, right, that's exactly right. The questioning techniques by your attorney. Sometimes you'll have attorney that's kind of hardcore, especially if it's a domestic or a family law case. They're gonna hit you hard on what you've got because your evidence is damaging to their client, so they're gonna come at you strong.
Yep.
And so that's normal, and you got to respect that. I've seen some investigators and some witnesses get upset when the lawyer's a little bit aggressive. They get they take it personal.
They shouldn't, and
No.
that's
Right.
the
their-
cross-examining attorneys just doing their job, and don't take it personal if the judge corrects you on something that
Right.
and some judges are harsher in their
Yeah.
tone,
Sure. Yeah.
and there's nothing,
Yeah.
and you might meet the judge or see the judge later in another experience, and they're very laid back, but it's just their demeanor in
They have to
court.
be.
Yeah,
Right.
Can you imagine the stuff that they have to see? And
And it's
people's
tough.
lives are in their hands.
All right, and every case is different.
Yep.
But now, when testifying as an expert, I have to make sure that everything I have when I go in there is correct. And in other words, I can prove that I'm an expert. I've already been proven, but I have to say, I've done this, I've attended that, I've been witness to all these cases that I've worked, and you have to show the last 3 years worth of cases that you've been involved in. But it's a little bit different because they're gonna attack your credibility, and sometimes the judge will allow that. But if you've been proven an expert, sometimes they say, let's move on. That's stipulated that he's an expert. So you have to understand prior to going into the trial what's stipulated and what's not, and so that's important too. Some investigators I see sometimes, especially the old law enforcement guys, use the lingo. They use acronyms or
yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
subject or 10 codes, or whatever. And so you got to be careful with that. And a good private investigator won't do that. Never use acronyms, never ever. And but you just got to be ready to go and expect the unexpected. Be able to answer the questions. If you don't know the answer, tell them you don't know. Say, I just don't know the answer to that. I'm unsure, so I don't want to give an answer right now. And a lot of times they'll push you in a corner, especially if you don't know something. That's what they're gonna attack. And
They're gonna try to pull something out of it.
right. And so say for example, you didn't see the individual that you were watching, but you were able to get evidence that you saw a male subject meeting his description walk into a hotel room. So you have to be, you're not going to lie and say, I'm 100% sure it was him.
Right.
And a good attorney on your side, on your team, will get to re-examine and help clarify that
Right.
on the
Yeah. And another thing is using documents. I use a lot of documents in my cases because I show graphs or charts or statistics. And I like to do that on the computer. So you got to make sure that everything's working before you get ready to testify. And I've seen that before. I've had it happen before. You go in, everything's working fine until the court starts, and then the system's not generating, or you're not hooked up to the internet or whatever, and you have to while you're on the stand, and that's a little bit aggravating. I was testifying before the North Carolina legislature one time, and the system went down, and I had my PowerPoint up, and I said, "Where's the IT guy when you need him?" And he was right behind me. He said, "I'm right here." So he was able to help me real quick and get everything. But I was being a smart ass when I said that. I didn't mean to. But anyhow, it's tough because if you're using graphs and charts, you got to remember something. If it's going to go wrong, it can.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to back up what you're putting up there on the screen. You got to say, well, according to such and such survey or whatever, I can prove this is to be true or a fact. So it's important. You got to know your client. And I see that quite a bit where investigators, or not necessarily investigators, but sometimes criminal defense attorneys, they don't know who their client is.
Right.
They may know that it's Dave Munday, but they don't
read
know.
the report that morning,
Thank you.
know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not good because it's obvious in court. The judge sees it.
Absolutely.
The jury certainly sees it. And so it just hurts your case. So you got to know your client, know where their strengths are, know where their weaknesses are, and be able to get through the case. Good attorneys I've worked for, not like I said a while ago, we'll go and we'll meet either the night before or the weekend before, and we'll sit down and we'll throw questions out. This is what they're going to ask you. We'll make a list of the worst possible questions that could be answered, and give them and let them see how they react. That's expensive a little bit, but it's still it helps your case when especially if it's a multi-million-dollar lawsuit.
Right.
It's either win or lose. So.
So when you say your credibility and things like that, so you could go in and you could have a report written of what you have, but they say this, it could be this, it could be that, but your
opinion.
Yeah, you're an expert witness because what you saw was true. Even if it's not in writing, you didn't get an actual picture, but what you saw, what you observed was to be true, and that can be used in court, correct?
What you're talking about, two different things. One is what a surveillance situation. I can't testify as an expert on that. Only thing I can testify as an expert on is police policy, pursuits, and use of force, civil type situations. But now in the investigator part, what you're talking about, if you didn't see it, you can't talk about it. You got to be able to see it, document it.
What if you see something and you're not able to get a picture quick enough, but
you can testify?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's different types of evidence. What you're talking about is testimonial evidence,
Correct.
where you swear and say, "Hey, I'm telling the truth."
Yeah.
If you've got testimonial evidence, but if you've got the video, you've got also evidence to corroborate that. Your testimony is still admissible as evidence. It just would have heavier weight if you've got something else to corroborate with it.
Right. And it's just important that when you go in there that you're prepared and that you can do the best job you can. As an expert, it's easier because you know what you're going to talk about. You've done it so many times. You go in there and it's kind of like a broken record. In a surveillance situation or a death case or anything like that, you got to do your homework and know what you're talking about, and be able to say, witness A, I can show without a doubt that he was lying because I followed up with all these interviews and nothing he said is true. Or whatever it may be. You got to be able to defend your decisions. Whatever decisions you make, you got to be able to back it up with either hard evidence that you've gathered during your investigation, or whatever your opinion may be based on the testimony that you're providing for as an expert. So, I like going to court.
Oh, I do too,
because it's a challenge,
and you learn something every time.
and it's a little bit nerve wracking. You go in and you go, okay,
intimidating.
it is. But what's fun is when you have that jury over there and you look at that jury and you say, okay, I think I can get to juror number 8, juror number 12, and juror number 1.
Yeah.
Because they're listening intensely. Where some jurors sitting there just wait, oh God, when is this going to be over? But you need to get to those 3 that you made eye contact with, and if they nodding their head that they believe what you're saying, okay, boom, keep reeling them in. If you got one sitting there looking at you like you got 5 eyes, and you need to back up and explain it a little better. Correct. Correct. And it's because they're in this most of the time. It's the first time those jurors are ever sat in that jury seat. So, but then you got the judge who's going to make the rules in the court, and he or she's going to run the court. Then you have the district attorney or the defendant's attorney. Then you have the plaintiff's attorney, both sides. Then you have the clerk of court. Then you have the stenographer. Then you have the bailiff. You got different players, and you got to know who all those people are. The one thing that I see more often in court is when there's an objection, and when it's either sustained or overruled by the judge. And people get confused because the attorney didn't explain to the witness what could happen, what to do if this situation arises. Sometimes they'll quickly answer. Well, then they have to strike and tell the jury, you know,
Yeah.
you didn't hear that.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
hell yeah, I heard it.
Yeah, it's still yeah.
It's still in their
gonna be in
head.
their mind,
The seed's
yeah.
planted. So you have to be careful. Sometimes they do that intentionally. So you got to be really careful with that and make sure that you understand. What I try to do when there's an objection is just take a deep breath and think about, okay, is it sustained or is it overruled? Okay, then see, I can answer, say, well, my opinion is based on this, this, and this, I feel that your client was exceeding the safe speed, or I feel your client was driving in a reckless manner, or used unnecessary force, whatever it may be. And so it's just each judge is different. You know, some will overrule, and some will sustain when you think it should be the opposite. You just never know. So that's why it's good to understand that jury. You've done depositions before, have you?
No.
Okay. Depositions, that's a totally different thing. Like in mostly civil cases where in criminal cases you have the discovery and again, we're not attorneys and we're not giving legal advice. And we should have started our conversation with that. But in depositions, in a civil case, always I have to go and give a deposition to the other side. It usually lasts sometimes a day, maybe 2 days. Of course, they pay. The other side pays for that, which, you know, there's a flat fee for deposition fee. And so, but you go in and they ask you questions based on what they're going to ask in open court. Then they take what you have and say, we either have a strong case or our case is not so strong because he's able to show where our client messed up. And that's a lot of times, then they'll go to mediation and the case can either be settled, which that's the best case scenario, is settled. It saves everybody money.
Yeah.
The courts, the client can get their settlement or whatever it may be, or it goes on to court, and then we hope we can get a verdict from there. So, you know, it's the depositions are important because every word, maybe, I don't know, or can you repeat is all in there, or I don't understand. It's all there, and they can go through. Then when you're in court in front of that jury, they're taking that deposition and they're reading it word by word. Now, didn't you swear to that on August 1st when you did your deposition? You said this. So, and you're bound by that deposition.
Right.
But in criminal cases, you have that discovery clause where you can get all the documents, all the reports, everything the police ordinarily do. You get copies of that to review. And that's what we do in our felony and murder cases. Have you had any cases where you've gone to court where you've just looked at everybody and said, somebody missed the ball?
Oh yeah, yeah. And yeah, and I've had a case before on a drug case, excuse me, where I had to use my testimonial evidence, the physical evidence of the drugs, and video evidence where we did a controlled drug buy, and we won the case, and we knew the reason they wanted it to go to trial. It was a solid case, but it had some parts in the video that were not pleasant. And I'll explain that. When you do a controlled drug buy, you meet your informant, you film, you do a video header, you say it's such and such date, we're going to such time, we're at such location, got the confidential reliable informants, you film the money, we have the serial numbers documented, and you give them a covert camera, and we're doing surveillance we can hear it and see it real time, probably a second off. Well, after the drug deal is done, they come meet us back at a secure location, and we take the evidence, package it, have them sign a receipt and pay them if we're paying them. Well, what had happened at the rendezvous point, we were meeting behind a grocery store that was out of business. It was like a strip mall, but it was basically abandoned, and we're in the back. And my informant was a female that was probably early 20s. She was attractive. And a truck driver pulls up in a 18-wheeler, and evidently he sleeps or parks his truck behind there, got permission from the property owner. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who she is, and he's making the assumption that she's a prostitute and I'm paying her for services. So he gets out and is very belligerent. And I can't, at that point, tell him I'm a police officer, you know, because so I have to be belligerent back.
So why didn't you try to get two cases in one, get a solicitation?
Yeah. So, what we're doing, basically he cussed me out and I cussed him out.
No.
And then we got in the car and left. And finished up the debrief at another location. Well, they wanted the defense attorney basically comes and said, you know, we're going to show the whole video, which we don't edit it anything. We'd have. And I said, fine. I said that was just we had to make do with what we made do. Well, we showed the video. Everybody was fine with it. It was kind of embarrassing, but it was nothing.
Embarrassing to you, or
a little bit to me. I mean, but it was more of a chuckle. Everybody's like,
Right.
you know, this is funny.
Right.
But it's got me, you know, I'm having to play a part,
Right.
you know, and
But
that's
it made
about-
you do better next time, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. But it was just basically I owned it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was like, hey, yeah, that's what it is. I had to, you know, let this guy know, hey, we're leaving, but don't, you know, I got to stand my ground to make it look like so. And he's like, well, you know, you're not supposed to be back here. I find y'all people back here all the time. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, we won't come back. Don't worry. But
Well, and you talked about confidential informants,
Mm-hmm.
and in your drug case years, that was probably the most important person.
yeah,
in your
and
case.
we would not release the confidential informant's name until we released the discovery. Then all we would release would be their name.
Okay.
And then when it come time to trial, they had to show up. So a lot of times these drug cases went to court because they were banking on the informant not showing up.
Correct.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they disappear, and
Yeah.
you have to find them.
Right.
And they don't
that's
want to
the-
testify.
That's the scary thing about using a CI, but
Yeah.
they're important and they're necessary in our work.
And 90% of the informants I've used when they do testify, now they don't want to,
No.
but 90% of them do a good job.
Sure. But now, when you said you paid your CIs, did you log all that money that you
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
paid from a fund, a
Yeah,
CI fund?
yeah. You have a CI fund and you have a form. I have to document money used to make control buys, and I have to log the money that is used to pay.
And this is through the police department.
Yeah,
But we do that.
I
I've
do the
used,
same thing.
well, I've
Here,
done the same thing, paid in confidential informants.
Because
And
Bradley has to pay his informants.
Sure.
It's out of his own pocket.
well, he
Yeah.
needs to keep up with
Keep
that.
up with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really
and
that's
put
tax write-off.
tax write. But you need to document serial numbers
Yeah.
and where and
Every
exactly.
bit of it, yeah.
You know,
Did you gave them code names? I'm assuming.
yeah, like we would assign them a number and a code name. The code
Right.
name wasn't really. We tried to do that a while, but you get so many informants.
Right.
It's mainly a code number, and and you have to make them reliable. And in order to do that, they have to get experience doing so many. It might just be one buy, but you have to get the more they do, the more experience,
Right.
and they're considered more credible. And if they testify in court, their credibility goes up.
Cool.
The more they're active, the more credibility they have. And like we would search them prior to sending them and after. We'd search their car. Now with a female, if we didn't have a female officer with us, we would have her basically pull her shirt out like this and pull her bra. We wouldn't
Yeah.
see. We'd have her pull it forward.
Pull it out.
You know,
If anything was in it, it would fall.
we'd have her take her shoes off, have her pull her pockets inside out. We would pat her down with the back of our we wouldn't use the palm, but the back of her hand. Search the car. I mean,
And where do you find these informants? Is it just somebody, just specify? I know
You build-
that
you build your
specify
informant.
Who,
Ye-
informants are people who are working for you, but
Mhm.
know everybody in the street.
yeah, and ideally, an informant would introduce an officer as an undercover capacity. That's ideal,
Right.
perfect world scenario. But a lot of times that doesn't happen.
Right.
And
And
inform,
sometimes they work both ways too.
yeah, and they're informants for a reason. It's not. I mean, they're not the best citizens in the world.
Right.
But you're only as in the drug world. You're only as a drug officer. You're only as good as your informants
Yeah.
are. Same thing with criminal case. I mean, you can use informants for murders,
Yep.
for stolen property, all kinds of things. And we use informants.
Yeah.
You know, whether it could
Right.
be talking to neighbors to an
Mhm.
extent. You know, and
Interviewing.
They're critical, and a lot of I notice a lot of investigative firms don't use informants. But Gary and I, the case that we worked years ago, big case, a lot of money, and the client provided CI money,
mhm.
and what we were able to do is bring in a professional. That when I say professional, he was made over $1 million a year probably.
Mhm.
But we talked to that individual in a private setting, and he was real covert in how he
Yeah.
wanted to meet. it was secret squirrel all the way. It was kind of comical how much we had to go, the level we had to go to meet with this guy, but his information was critical. And he knew that what he knew was important for our case. And so we had $100 bills, and we'd put them out there on the table, and he'd tell us, and he'd back up when you do this right here. I knew that I had to put another $100 bill, and he'd say a little more. Of course, everything was being taped, and he knew that, and everything was being used, but his information was critical. Without him, we wouldn't have had anything. And it got up to a certain point where I knew I couldn't exceed it because that's what I'd agreed to the client with. And he understood. I didn't tell him that, but he understood, like, hey, I'm getting the end of these hundreds, so we got to come up with a
And we had professional informants that we would use where they would go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction until they got maxed out.
Right.
And you would call
reference.
Yeah, we would call references on them, and you'd say, hey, I worked in Charlotte, worked with Detective Jones, here's his number, call, and you call him up and he's like, yeah, he's a bang up. Most of the time they were really highly recommended, and they would stay at a city, town, county for 3-4 months. The big thing is to say, look, I know you're going to get ghosted, you're going to ghost me, but I need to know where I can get you a year from now. And they would. Now you might have to pay for them to come back to town or go pick them up.
I called those professional CIs.
Yeah, we called them mercenaries.
Yeah.
That was the term we used.
That's better.
Yeah,
and that's true. That's exactly what they are. I mean, they see what they're doing is wrong, or they see that the damage it's doing to the society. So they're saying, okay, this is my contribution. Yeah. I can help out. And without them, a police officer has no case, especially in narcotics or homicide. Yeah, you can't work unless you have those confidential.
Anytime we had a shooting or a murder, you start burning up. You call all your informants and you say, look, this is a big deal. We need to know. If you get something, call me. And, there will be some cash flow going towards you. Yeah. If you give us something we can use. And they'd go to work. Yeah. They clock in.
Right. And that's good. And you got to have those. But let's talk just a minute about physical evidence versus circumstantial evidence. And we work with both. Anytime we get physical evidence, we have to treat it just like we did when we were in law enforcement. But what we have to do is notify the state that we have found physical evidence supporting our case, especially if it's in one of the felony murder cases. And there's case law on that. And we talked about that during one other episode. But it's now circumstantial evidence. A lot of cases are built on that and from both sides. And so you have to really understand what you're dealing with before you go in. Okay, is our case solid with good physical evidence, or is our case mostly circumstantial evidence? And as long as you know that going in, I think it gives you a better edge as a witness.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's what I was trying to say about the testimony.
Right. Yeah. And again, you got to.
And with testimonial evidence, everybody's testimony is supposed to be viewed as equal unless you're deemed an expert witness. Like your testimony in a case and a police officer's testimony in a case would be based as equal. Unless the police officer is deemed an expert witness. That's instructions to the jury. You got to.
Yeah, in cases when I go as an expert, the judge, he or she tells the jury, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman's been deemed an expert in previous court. I don't have to prove myself again once you're proven. He's been deemed an expert in police policy. So, and then sometimes they'll allow, what do they call that, Jason? Like a voir dire for me, where they'll go through and say, well, okay, tell the jury what you're, and they'll ask
to me
those
that gives you
questions.
more credibility.
And I like it when they do that. In other words, don't say he's an expert and move on. Show why he's an expert. Yeah. And I think that's better. So, but the judge gives that in the final when he talks to the jury before he sends them back to their deliberation room, lets them know his instructions on how to take the case.
And talk about this. You talked to me about this before. It was a case you were in where the charging officer would be sitting beside the state's attorney and would look disinterested, bored, rolling his eyes, and that is. The jury sees the same thing.
They watch it all.
Yeah.
And then that's why it's important to be able to talk to that jury after everything's settled, whether it's guilty, not guilty, responsible, not responsible, after it's over. And the judge gives them those instructions too. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've been relieved. If you wish to talk about the case, you can do so now to either party. And so, but a lot of attorneys will say, I'm done, let's go. But you can learn so much.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I was able to do. And several of the jurors in that case, and we were successful, said, the detective acted like he was not interested. He's over there with his eyes closed at one time. And and that's not just the detectives, that's other people involved in the system, whether it's a witness or whatever. They're watching. And they know, but they always, the question would be, okay, we know who the defense attorney is, we know who the district attorney is. What's your job? They always, what do you do? Well, I'm the investigator. Well, and that's when they kind of pop up and say, well, tell us about that. What part did you play, and what's this? Especially if I didn't get to testify, because it's something they don't understand or they never seen before. And courts, like I said, I enjoy going to court because it's exciting. It gets me up, ready to go. It makes your job worthwhile. Now, I always enjoyed it when I was on the patrol.
Yeah, I always liked it because you learn something
You
every time you, because no case, I don't care who you are, is going to be perfect, and you might have a hole in your case that you didn't realize till it was pointed out. And once it's pointed out in a public forum in court, that burns into your brain. So you're like, I don't want to do that again.
Correct. Right.
And
again, you learn from every time you testify. But you were talking about a while ago getting cases mixed up. We've got so many. You got to be able to say, okay, this is this case, and don't veer over to this case. Make sure everything's straight board. But you have to stay right there focused. So, but it's fun. But what was good when you were in court, Tim was in court, but when you'd go into court, you knew that judge knew you or that DA knew you, and you weren't going to go in there and bullshit. You weren't going to embellish your cases. You were going to tell the truth straight up and down, whether it helped your case or hurt your case. And that made a difference too.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you'd see officers go in there, and I'm not saying they lied. They'd embellish sometimes.
I heard an older officer. This was when I was younger, and this officer had been on 30 plus years. So he probably started in the 60s, mid 60s. And I remember his terminology was, you need to testify harder. And what he was insinuating was, you need to stretch the truth.
Yeah.
That was what he was, and you're like, no, and you just say, well, that was for that time frame, but I'm not going to do, but that's the mindset,
the mentality of that time.
Yeah, you testify harder. Yeah.
Well, it's not what you're doing out there is dangerous, so you can stretch the truth a little bit.
Or they're guilty of something they've never been. Right. They've done something.
Get caught again next week or whatever it was. I don't see that as much as, like you said.
No,
you're
right, correct. Now
I have seen it. I have seen it, and because I was there on cases back in the 80s and 70s, and you're sitting there and you're going, I don't remember that part of it, but back you just said okay, and then but you learn from it, and you knew not to do that, and it wasn't many times, but anyhow, this has been one of those episodes that I hope other investigators out there can learn from. Those that are just learning, getting into the business. It's because it's an important component. And what we want to do with you, Brianna, is go to court and let you see us testify that would be the great part.
And you've been to court a couple of times on some cases where we've done the
So you know what a courtroom looks like, and you've been in there, and you can go in and but it's good to be able to sit on that hot seat and testify. And be able to win or lose that case. But it's always good when you can walk out there with your client with a win or a settlement. That's the big thing. So we got last call coming up. We missed last call last week. We all had to work, or you.
We were
had a
all
great
working.
Episode, but,
we all had something going on, and
I'm sorry.
We got a good episode for the last call. But also, I want to bring up, we are thinking about maybe having another open house come up soon. For people that want to come check out our office, we're working on that, and we may have a date next podcast. We might have something secure on that and let people know about that. Maybe
that's not this Thursday, but the following Thursday or last Thursday this month.
Yeah,
is the
the live after 5. So we're going for the
got too much Sylvia coming to town again.
Yeah, so we're going to try to have an open house during that event.
Okay, we're good. Well, again, we appreciate all of you joining us and hope to see you next time. It's Monday afternoon roundtable.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Last call coming up. Bye. Welcome back, everyone. Monday afternoon roundtable, last call. We got a special blend today, Brianna. It's called Carriage House Apple Brandy. It's a Carolina tradition. Tell you a little bit about it.
Tell us a little about.
Carolina Distillery, located in historic downtown Lenore. It's our home county in North Carolina. They distill a single barrel brandy utilizing generations of old family recipe. Our brandy is handcrafted in copper pot stills and barrel, giving each batch its own unique character and flavor. So we're gonna test it here. It's a local. So they got the little wax dripping, kind of like the Maker's Mark, but it's green. I don't know if
It's
I'd
green
copy-
apples.
I don't know if I'd ever copy Maker's Mark because that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, you were gonna pour, weren't you? Oh, I'm sorry.
You lied.
It's to the rim. Okay, I'll take that one.
Dang.
There we go.
All right.
Hold-
It's pretty light. I feel like it's not going to be.
No,
as
it's
strong.
it's an 80 proof. It's barrel number 207. It's 80. 40% alcohol by volume, 80 proof. Distilled in Carolina Distillery, Lenore, North Carolina, which is pretty damn cool, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So let's test
Honestly, a lot of the stuff y'all been trying is North Carolina.
It is.
And it's pretty good.
Yeah, we haven't had a bad one yet.
North
That's
Carolina's got furniture and whiskey. Who knew?
Yeah.
Pretty Women.
Oh, thanks.
Salute.
Oh, that's so smooth.
That's really smooth.
It is
That'll
smooth.
get you in trouble
Quickly.
very fast.
What flavors?
Usually I don't take a second sip.
Can you taste the vanilla maybe a little bit?
I don't know. I never really taste flavors. I don't think it's vanilla. It doesn't give us a description.
No, but I'm sure it's got different because it's in the copper pots.
Maybe vanilla, but I taste a flower.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
it's like you said, it's got a good color to it. It's not too strong, doesn't bite at all. It's really smooth. So, man, that's a pleasant surprise.
I know.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were going to expect there.
Yeah.
Tim, what'd you pay for that?
Who's been drinking it? Is this-
No,
is
it
this
was-
the first time?
yeah, we
you
just
opened
opened,
the
yeah.
seal.
Is it less than $50?
You tried it?
Yeah. Tim brought this in. It's but the cool thing is from our hometown, so we wanted to try it out, and so we're pushing this in hard. So I'm gonna give it a 9.5
Let's see.
from 1 to 10.
Since the last time I was on here, I had some pretty rough stuff.
You don't have to explain.
Anybody remembers that episode? But
That was the 130 proof, wasn't it?
oh yeah, that was a
Were we here? Was that here?
Mm-hmm.
that was one of those ones you gotta either keep drinking or go take a nap. But this one, I'll probably give it an 8.5.
Fair enough.
I was thinking the same thing about 8.5.
Strong
Not
score.
something that I would go grab off the shelf, but better than something that I would normally. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not too strong. It's not got that.
It's not overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right. And we apologize last week. We didn't do a last call because we were all spread out. We were
Is that why
working.
We had to
weren't
work
really
that evening.
sharp? We
Yeah.
had to make up sharp?
Yeah, that's right. And then you had a guest on last week. Did a great job. That was a good addition. I enjoyed listening to that. He's going to come back, I think.
Yeah.
It gets better as you
Mike Austin.
Mike Austin, yeah, talking about the veterans, working with the farm that he's trying to get a 501c3 nonprofit, which he's working hard to get, and it's going to take some politics and everything else, but he'll get it, I hope,
Oh yeah.
because there's a big need there. So, what do we got coming up?
Well, we
You guys might have something coming.
I'm kind of slow at the moment.
Caseload slow.
Yeah. So I'm kind of working, trying to do some things on the side, marketing wise, trying to get some
Yeah.
our names out there. But got a little bit of work. It was very busy. January, February, March, April. About mid-April, it started slowing down. So it's just one of those.
Right. It fluctuates.
It'll pick back up.
Oh, of course, and right now I got a big caseload going on, and so it's a lot of felony cases, and what the sad part about those because they'll all come up at the same time
Mhm.
for court, and you're going from one court to the other, and you're trying to.
Yeah, and I'm playing catch up on some felony cases. I got a couple left that are wrapping up. I'm trying to get everything, ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the way to Blowing Rock with my friend, and she's a realtor, and she didn't really know what all we can do. Like the new stuff we're doing for foreclosed homes and things like that. She was like, I had no idea you guys even did anything other than infidelity. And I was like, there's a whole world of things that I would rather be doing than infidelity.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on
lot of
of what we could do.
Yeah.
You're doing some work for the banks on foreclosures and things like
Yeah.
that, right?
Or a property
Investors.
investors.
Investors,
They look for foreclosed homes. We try to find who the owner is,
They're willing to sell.
contact them. We just basically do hey, what's the deal? Are you
Yeah.
willing to sell? We got a guy interested, willing to pay cash.
Mhm.
If they say, yeah, I'm interested, we give them the number. They call
Yeah.
we do a background on each property and owner.
Who owns what?
90% of them are
Deceased. Right.
either deceased or
Expired number, dead number.
disconnected number. So then you might have to go to the next level of the family, and then go from there. And
And that's something you can do during the downtime.
yeah,
And that's something, honestly, that I didn't know we could do. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. Yeah, we can definitely do that. And it just, every other month, I'm introduced to all these new different things that we can do that I had no idea.
But you bring in a lot of new business based on your
Yeah.
contacts that you
Yeah.
have,
Mhm.
and people come up to you and they know what you do, and they say, hey, can you help me out? And we can either yay or nay.
Yep.
So it works out good.
We had this one person call us from Louisiana. He's some sort of security guy. I don't know. He's got like a bunch of different licenses. And he saw us from Bradley's post on posting a bell skip. And he was like, I think you guys could be nice, great to work with. And sometimes it's hard to follow up with those people because they see something, they want it, and they don't want to, it doesn't end up working out. But man, the network that you can have for PIs, it's a lot about marketing.
It is.
Marketing.
And getting your name out there and doing a good job, and
Yeah.
and letting
Being
people know what you
reputable.
can and can't do. What's the worst thing you do is take a case that's just
Yeah.
just too
Try
overwhelming,
to make something out of nothing.
right? Or
Doesn't
they're
work.
not paying you like they
Yeah.
should, or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
So and money's important because you,
Oh,
you
yeah.
got to do that to keep
Yeah.
the doors open. And we do this podcast to
Been
kind
there.
of break the
Yeah.
monotony and come in and talk about things. And I enjoy this; it's fun.
Mhm.
You know.
it also it does, like Brianna saying, it shows some of the things that most people don't know we can
Right.
do.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
educates people. I have a lot of people who want to be PIs, but they don't necessarily want to do the work that it goes into it, or they don't understand how much work that it will, how much work you can do, and how much it's a whole nother
You
world.
can
People don't
say-
see, and so this is great to be able to open up this world and say, this is matter of fact things, this is what we do.
Mhm.
I mean, you can tell people you make. I'm just going to use this number because it's easy. Let's
Mhm.
just say you make $100 an hour on
Yeah.
a case. In reality, you don't.
No.
Because
Well,
you-
and they're
Maybe
thinking you're
20.
working, 200 hours.
hours
Yeah.
for getting paid
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
20 hours.
All right.
So
Yeah.
it waters it down, and the time you spend
Yep.
not on cases working, trying to
Yep.
get
Due
Yeah.
diligence,
It's all
Due
preparing.
outside, doing
yeah
background.
training
Yeah.
or marketing or
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah, the good thing that I enjoy that helps me more than anything is when I have a case that's a little bit complicated or it's a little bit different, and I can call you guys in and say, well, tell me what you think.
Give me some help.
Yeah, well, and then you or
That's the
whoever
best
can
part
say,
about this
well,
partnership.
my experience is it's better if you do it this way, or I've had better experience in this way,
Yeah.
or you may need to call this witness, or let's do this, and it helps me. So that's
Sometimes it's always different.
it
Right?
is,
Mhm.
it is, and sometimes
Like
it's
today, the lawyer.
right. So it's
so
good.
confused.
I do want to have another attorney come on, maybe
Yeah.
somebody from the prosecutor's office.
Yeah, that'd be
good.
great.
That would be awesome.
It's getting close to election time. Maybe getting a couple of politicians in.
Mhm.
That's what we like doing.
Yeah.
That's the fun part of.
Oh yeah.
Getting all the sides, different sides, seeing different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're getting more feedback from people based on the political stuff. So and I don't mean to get into politics. I'm not
Right.
saying that,
Right.
but it's just fun during the last call. We can talk about things. And,
Just
and-
discussion. It's.
yeah.
Well, you think about what people talk about at a bar. It's going to be politics.
Oh gosh.
Sports,
Yeah,
or
And you
what-
see that all the time.
Yeah.
Oh Lord. Politics or sports? That's
Mhm.
it. Or
Mhm.
women and men. Either you're. Sorry. I work at a bar part time, so.
No, but now I'm gonna tell you this:
Now, see,
when I
if I could wear a mic, oh y'all, we would have some stuff to talk
I
about
can
here.
imagine,
Mhm.
and we may do that sometime. But
That would
what's
be great.
not necessarily wire you up,
Right,
but
right.
talk about your experience.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing jury consulting, if I can get a bartender on that jury,
Yeah.
automatic,
Oh, yeah.
automatic, because they know they
Oh,
hear
yeah.
so much shit.
Everything.
Not necessarily about the
Everything.
case, but
But
they
from
hear
different points of
family
view.
stuff.
Character.
They listen.
Absolutely.
They just do a great job.
Oh, yeah.
As jurors, and I always like
And
picking
people
bartenders.
open up when they're drunk.
True.
You're sitting behind the bar, and these people are spilling out their whole entire life story.
I'll
to
bet.
you.
I'll bet. Especially you.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. How
And
many
then
how many
if you have
proposals
to-
have you had?
Not proposals, but people like asking for my
What's your
not
phone
legal
number?
advice, but my professional advice because they know I do that part time, and then they're like, well, I got this going on, and
Just tease them. Just say, hey, look, this is what I can do. But
Yeah.
now to get the goods, you're gonna have to.
Now I will tell people. I mean, I'll even meet with people and say, this is what you can do to know the truth, and this is what you can do to be able to win in court.
Right.
There's two ways you can go with this.
Peace of
You can
mind.
know the truth.
Mhm.
Or winning
I
a
can tell
case.
you what to do without me, but if you want to go to court, you're going to need me. So this
Right.
is what you're going to need to do.
Right.
And sometimes people listen to my advice and they do the complete opposite.
But I think that's an asset to
Oh,
us,
yeah.
having you in that capacity, because people, they trust you.
Yeah,
They
For
they
sure.
got you. They know they can
yeah,
depend on you.
Yeah.
So and you understand the personal part of it.
For
You know,
sure.
the workers and the people that are out there busting their ass every
Yep.
day that are involved on both
for
sides.
Mhm.
sure.
You know, from the parent perspective.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you got a couple domestic cases. Tim's got one going on now, and so those are pain in the ass, but we do them. We do those.
Watered down.
It is well any kind of whiskey. If you, that's why the
I'll
ice
pour
breaks
you
it.
another one, superstar.
I know, right? Sorry.
I quit drinking whiskey a
ice-
while back.
The ice brings out the spirits in the
Yeah.
whiskeys.
Giving you a hard time, you know
That's
that.
true. Yeah. I mean,
We had a good lunch today
Been
at
here for a while.
Local Roots
Yeah, local roots and provisions.
in Lincolnton, North Carolina.
grilled chicken, bacon.
I haven't had a bad meal there yet.
I hadn't had
Pie.
And we're going to have the owner on soon. Maybe he'll come to the open house we have. And yeah, Ethan and Rachel, just wonderful people. Got a new little guy in the family. So, and then we have the manager there, and then we have what's his name, the bartender,
Isaac.
Isaac.
You know, like from
Isaac
the Love
Hayes.
Boat.
Hey!
Like
That's
from the
his-
Love Boat.
His name is.
Oh my
We got to get a
With
sign.
the beard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he's a mixologist for sure.
Yeah.
He's
No, he's a good guy. Yeah.
he knows his whiskeys and how to blend.
That's
And
true.
I just don't know if he's ever
He
watched
knows
the
what
Love
you
Boat.
want and don't want.
I know that's what you need to do is give him something to show about
Say,
the
do
Love
you know
Boat.
who this guy
You don't
is?
know about the
Th-
Love
This
Boat.
is
either.
No, I
the
don't know
th-
if
this is
I
the
know.
greatest bartender ever. You know?
Isaac's the Love
Yeah.
Boat. Isaac. He was the
Yeah.
bartender on. Love
He'd
Boat.
always do this. He'd go.
He's a cool guy.
I did that before we started. I did.
Drink your drink.
Yeah.
Okay. Tim's behind the scenes. He's doing the technology for us today, which is kind of scary, but you know we miss Garrett.
That's not bad at all.
We need Garrett back.
We need an IT person.
Yeah.
I would love to have.
So
Garrett back.
anyhow, it's been
Some help.
Garrett's a good kid. I miss him too. It's been a good episode.
Mhm.
I highly recommend Carriage House Apple Brandy from Lenore,
Pretty
North
good.
Carolina. Excellent. Can't go wrong with it. Thanks for joining us. Hope to
Thank
see you
you.
next time. Thank you for joining us, Brianna.
Mhm.
Jason.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.